The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Sterling estate as Marcus Chun adjusted the final rose arrangement near the marble fountain. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, each bloom positioned perfectly for the afternoon ceremony that would unite two of the wealthiest families on the East Coast. 12-year-old Emma appeared at his elbow, her school backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dad, you missed a spot on the fountain edge," she said, pointing to a barely visible water stain. Marcus smiled and wiped the marble clean. "What would I do without my quality control supervisor?" he said, ruffling her dark hair. "You sure you don't mind waiting in the staff break room during the ceremony?" Emma shrugged. "I brought my math homework. Besides, I like watching you make everything perfect. The rich people don't even notice how hard you work." Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen similar wedding preparations where you're from. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest. 3 years ago, he had been Dr. Marcus Chun, running a successful marriage counseling practice. Now he was simply the groundskeeper who arrived before dawn to ensure every detail met the Sterling family's impossible standards. The following Monday, Marcus stood before his board of directors with Sarah's presentation loaded on the conference room screen. The 12 executives around the polished table represented decades of business experience and billions in combined wealth. Before we discuss our Q4 strategy, I want to share some research that will reshape our entire approach. Marcus began, clicking to Sarah's first slide. For the next 30 minutes, he walked through her analysis point by point. The room grew increasingly quiet as the depth of her insights became clear. When he finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. "Who conducted this research?" asked Margaret Hayes, the company's chief marketing officer. "Sarah Martinez. She'll be joining us as Vice President of Strategic Development next week." "What's her background?" pressed board member Robert Chun, Marcus's uncle and largest investor. 20 years of real-world experience with our target demographic," Marcus replied confidently. Margaret leaned forward. "Marcus, this analysis is extraordinary. Her segmentation strategy could revolutionize how we approach working family markets. I want to meet with her immediately. Her pricing model alone could increase our user base by 300%, added CFO David Kim, studying the financial projections. Robert nodded slowly. "If she can deliver this level of insight consistently, she's worth 10 times what we're paying our current consultants." At that moment, Sarah entered the conference room for her introduction, wearing a navy blue suit that Marcus had insisted the company purchase for her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady as she presented additional research she'd completed over the weekend. The board peppered her with questions about market penetration, competitive analysis, and growth projections. Sarah answered each one with the confidence of someone who had lived the problems she was solving. When the meeting ended, Margaret approached Sarah directly. "I've been in marketing for 25 years, and this is the most sophisticated consumer insight I've encountered. Welcome to the team." Sarah looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes, finally believing what he'd seen in her all along. 6 months later, Marcus watched from his office window as Sarah crossed the Chun Technologies courtyard. Her confidence tried a stark contrast to the hesitant woman he'd encountered at Le Bernardin. Her strategic insights had transformed 3 major product launches, earning her recognition as one of the city's top business minds. Emma burst into his office, followed by Diego Martinez, who had become her close friend since receiving a full scholarship to the prestigious Dalton School that Sarah could now afford. "Daddy, Diego got an A on his calculus test," Emma announced proudly. "That's wonderful," Marcus said, ruffling Diego's hair. The boy had flourished in his new environment, his natural brilliance finally receiving the nurturing it deserved. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her smile radiant as she watched the children together. "Ready for our strategy meeting?" she asked Marcus. "Always," he replied, grateful for how their partnership had evolved into something deeper than either had expected. As they walked toward the conference room, Sarah paused. "Marcus, I never properly thanked you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "You don't need to thank me," Marcus replied. "You did all the work. I just provided the opportunity." Sarah shook her head. "You provided hope. And sometimes that's everything. Later that evening, Marcus received a text message that made him smile. David Kellerman, the former Loop Bernardine manager, had applied for a position at Chin Technologies. Sarah had recommended they pass on his application. At his daughter's suggestion, they celebrated with dinner at a small family restaurant where the staff treated every customer with genuine respect, regardless of their wealth or status. If this story of hidden potential and second chances touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, or if you've ever witnessed similar overlooked talents in someone you know. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone to truly see them. Marcus retreated to the groundskeeper's shed to change from his work clothes into the navy suit he kept for special occasions. Emma had insisted he bring it for the post-ceremony cleanup, saying he deserved to look nice even if nobody would notice him. The suit was simple but well-tailored, purchased during his counseling practice days when first impressions mattered. As he adjusted his tie in the small mirror, Marcus heard Helena's frantic voice outside, growing closer to the shed. "There has to be someone," she muttered into her phone. "The photographers are already here. Victoria's grandfather flew in from Switzerland. We cannot have a scandal." Marcus stepped outside, straightening his jacket. Helena stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she took in his appearance. The afternoon light caught the gray threads in his dark hair, and a navy suit transformed him from invisible groundskeeper into someone who could belong among the wedding guests. "Richard," Helena breathed, her relief palpable. "Thank God you finally arrived. Victoria has been trying to reach you all morning. Where have you been?" Marcus opened his mouth to correct the misunderstanding, but Helena had already grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "The ceremony begins in 2 hours," she continued, pulling him toward the main house. "We need to get you ready for photos with Victoria immediately." "Wait, I'm not," Marcus began, but Helena's momentum carried them both forward, her desperation making her deaf to his protests. Helena's grip tightened as she steered Marcus through the mansion's marble corridors toward the bridal suite. The magnitude of the deception crashed over him like a cold wave. 300 guests expecting a billionaire. Victoria preparing to marry a stranger. Society photographers documenting every moment. "Helena, please listen," Marcus said, trying to stop their forward momentum. "I need to tell you something important about who I really am." "Not now, Richard," Helena snapped, her wedding planner persona in full crisis mode. "We'll discuss your cold feet after the ceremony. Victoria needs to see that you're here and committed." Through the ornate doorway, Marcus glimpsed Victoria in her grandmother's vintage lace gown, her reflection multiplied in the suite's antique mirrors. She looked beautiful and terrified, clutching a bouquet of white roses that trembled in her hands. At that moment, Emma appeared around the corner, her math homework forgotten. She took in the scene with 12-year-old clarity that cut through adult complications. "Dad," she whispered, tugging his sleeve. "That lady looks really sad. Like when Mrs. Peterson's husband didn't come to their anniversary party." Marcus knelt to Emma's level, his heart torn between honesty and compassion. "Sometimes people need help even when it's complicated, sweetheart." Emma nodded solemnly. "Mom always said you should help sad people, especially if you're the only one who can." Marcus felt his resolution crystallize. The truth could wait another hour if it meant protecting Victoria from public humiliation. The ceremony space transformed as guests settled into ivory-draped chairs beneath the ancient oak trees. Marcus stood at the altar, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. The string quartet's gentle melody floated across the grounds as 300 of society's most influential figures waited for the bride. Helena positioned herself strategically near the photographer, her relief evident as she whispered into her headset. "Crisis averted. The groom is here and ready." Marcus scanned the crowd and spotted a distinguished elderly man in the front row whose sharp eyes seemed to see everything. Edward Sterling, Victoria's grandfather, studied Marcus with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. The music swelled, and Victoria appeared at the garden's entrance, her vintage gown catching the dappled sunlight. She walked down the petal-strewn aisle with measured steps, her eyes finding Marcus's face with a mixture of curiosity and relief. As she drew closer, Marcus saw something unexpected in her expression. Instead of the practiced smile of arranged marriage, there was genuine warmth, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "You came," she whispered when she reached the altar, her voice carrying a note of surprise that suggested she hadn't been certain he would. "I'm here," Marcus replied, the simple truth carrying more weight than she could know. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering as Marcus committed himself to an impossible charade born of compassion. As the officiant spoke about love and commitment, Marcus found himself responding to the ceremony's prompts with unexpected sincerity. When asked to repeat his vows, his voice carried the weight of real experience rather than rehearsed lines. "I promise to honor you," he said, his eyes meeting Victoria's. "To see you for who you truly are, not who the world expects you to be." Victoria's breath caught slightly. These weren't the formal vows they had discussed over email. There was something raw and genuine in his words that made her forget the 300 watching guests. "I promise to protect what matters most," Marcus continued, thinking of Emma watching from the staff area, of Victoria's vulnerability, of the courage it took to open one's heart again, to build something real together, even when it's difficult. The guests murmured appreciatively. Several women dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs, moved by the groom's unexpected eloquence. Helena stood straighter, her earlier panic replaced by professional pride. This was exactly the kind of emotional moment that would photograph beautifully for the society pages. Edward Sterling leaned forward in his chair, his weathered hands gripping his walking cane. Something about this young man's words resonated with hard-earned wisdom rather than inherited privilege. The intensity in his voice spoke of loss survived and love earned through sacrifice. When Victoria spoke her responding vows, her voice carried new warmth, as if she was truly seeing her groom for the first time. The reception hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and golden candles as guests raised champagne flutes in anticipation. Helena approached the head table with barely contained satisfaction, her crisis management having produced what appeared to be a perfectly executed wedding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Helena announced into the microphone, "it's time for the groom's speech." Marcus felt his stomach drop as 300 expectant faces turned toward him. This was the moment he had dreaded, when silence would expose him or words would damn him. He stood slowly, his hands trembling as he gripped the microphone. Victoria looked up at him with encouraging eyes, her trust both humbling and terrifying. Marcus cleared his throat and began to speak from the deepest part of his heart. "When I lost everything I thought mattered," he said, his voice gaining strength, "I learned that love isn't about what you can provide or what status you hold. It's about showing up when someone needs you most." The room fell silent, captivated by his vulnerability. True commitment means choosing someone every single day, even when the world tells you they're not enough or you're not worthy. It means believing that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and cherished for exactly who they are. Edward Sterling set down his champagne glass, his full attention focused on the young man whose words carried the weight of lived experience rather than inherited wisdom. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued, the words flowing from years of counseling others and his own journey through loss. "I've learned that real love isn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts. It's discovered in quiet moments when someone chooses to stay during your darkest hour." Victoria's eyes widened as she recognized something profound in his words. This wasn't the polished rhetoric of a billionaire heir. This was someone speaking from deep personal experience about sacrifice and resilience. "Some of you might think love is about finding someone perfect," Marcus said, his gaze sweeping across the elegant crowd. "But I've discovered it's about finding someone worth fighting for, someone whose happiness becomes more important than your own comfort or reputation." The guests leaned forward, mesmerized by his authenticity. Several couples reached for each other's hands, moved by words that cut through social pretense to touch something universal. Edward Sterling's weathered face showed growing recognition. This young man spoke like someone who had counseled broken hearts and rebuilt his own life from ashes. His wisdom came from struggle, not privilege. Helena began to sense something wasn't quite right. The Richard Pemberton she had researched was known for corporate mergers, not emotional intelligence. This speech revealed depths that didn't match his public profile. Victoria felt her heart responding to Marcus's words in ways she hadn't expected, as if meeting her groom for the very first time. Marcus set down the microphone with shaking hands, knowing he could no longer maintain the deception that had grown beyond his control. The weight of 300 expectant faces and Victoria's trusting eyes became unbearable. "Victoria," he said quietly, taking her hands in his, "there's something I need to tell you, and I pray you'll understand why I made the choice I did." The reception hall buzzed with curious whispers as guests sensed drama unfolding at the head table. "I'm not Richard Pemberton," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "I'm Marcus Chun, the groundskeeper here at your family's estate. Your real fiancé sent a text message saying he couldn't go through with the wedding." Victoria's face went pale, but she didn't pull her hand away. "You mean you're not a billionaire heir?" she whispered. "I'm a single father who works with my hands and raises my daughter on a groundskeeper's salary," Marcus replied. "But when I saw how much this day meant to you and how devastated you'd be if 300 guests witnessed your abandonment, I couldn't bear to let that happen." Helena's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The society photographers raised their cameras, sensing the story of the decade. Edward Sterling rose from his chair, his walking cane tapping against the floor as he approached the head table with determined steps. Edward Sterling's voice cut through the shocked murmurs as he reached the head table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his commanding presence instantly silencing the room. "I've spent 80 years building this family's legacy, and I know character when I see it." Helena stepped forward desperately. "Mr. Sterling, I can explain. This is clearly a misunderstanding that needs immediate damage control." Edward raised his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "For 3 months, I've watched this young man arrive before dawn to make our grounds perfect. I've seen him work with dignity, treat every person with respect, and raise his daughter with values that most of our social circle has forgotten." Marcus stood frozen as Edward continued. "Today, he chose to protect my granddaughter's dignity at great personal risk. That kind of character cannot be bought, inherited, or learned in business school." Victoria rose beside Marcus, her wedding dress rustling as she faced the crowd. "Grandfather's right," she said, her voice gaining strength. "In one afternoon, Marcus showed me more genuine care than I've experienced in years of arranged introductions and calculated courtships." The guests sat in stunned silence, some horrified by the breach of social protocol, others moved by the unexpected display of authentic emotion. Edward placed his weathered hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Young man, I'd like to offer you a position heading our family foundation. We need someone who understands what real service means." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office overlooking the Sterling Foundation headquarters, watching Emma complete her homework at the polished conference table. The foundation's mission to support single-parent families had become his passion, allowing him to use his counseling background to help others rebuild their lives. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her business suit replaced by casual clothes that suited her much better. "How was the board meeting?" she asked, settling beside Emma to review her math problems. "We approved funding for 12 new scholarship programs," Marcus replied, still amazed by the transformation his life had taken. Emma's idea about mentorship programs really impressed the directors. Emma beamed with pride. "Dad always says everyone has hidden talents waiting to be discovered." Marcus wrapped his arms around both of them, his heart full of gratitude for the unexpected path that had led him here. The wedding that never was had become the beginning of something far more meaningful than either he or Victoria could have imagined. Edward Sterling's foundation work had given Marcus purpose beyond his dreams, while his relationship with Victoria had grown slowly into something real and lasting, built on genuine understanding rather than social expectation. If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've witnessed similar hidden talents surprise everyone around you. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings emerge from the most unexpected moments of courage.